Hey there, I'm Jules Jenssen. I'm a drummer, a playback engineer, and an audiovisual artist, and I'm here on behalf of Forecast to talk to you about their incredible new device, the Multimedia Visual Performer, aka the MVP. So what is the MVP? The MVP is a simple, affordable solution that can be used to host video content and lighting content for live shows, art installations, venues, you name it. Anytime that you normally need a bunch of complicated software and equipment to host video content and trigger it live during shows, or lighting content and cues, this thing's got you covered. In a super small, simple footprint that's really easy to use and trigger with different devices such as Ableton Live from a computer or MIDI controllers. It's really flexible and can be used in all sorts of applications. So what's in the box? Firstly, you're going to get this nice zip-up clamshell case. That's going to include a couple data cables here. That's going to have a USB-C to USB-C for connecting the MVP to a computer with a USB-C port on the hub or on the computer itself, as well as a classic USB-A to USB-C for the same scenario. You're also going to get 4 M2 spec mounting screws, which can be used to mount the MVP in a rack tray scenario or something similar to that. You're also going to get a 5-volt, 2-amp power supply for any time that you're using the MVP in a standalone situation without bus power. You can power it that way, which is great. And then, of course, the MVP itself. It's amazing how small and portable this thing is. It's lightweight, which is great. Every little bit of weight counts when you're traveling and touring around and flying stuff or just carrying it around. So it's good, but it still feels robust. Just for comparison, here it is next to an iPhone 14. That's pretty incredible. Okay, so let's look at the I/O on the back of the MVP here. So first off, it's got a power supply on it for when you're using it in standalone mode and you're not getting bus power through the host port. It's got a classic 5-pin DIN MIDI in, so any sort of device that uses a DIN MIDI cable, you can hook it up that way and send your notes in, trigger your content simply. It's got an Ethernet RJ45 port here. That's usable for RTP MIDI in or ArtNET in and then ArtNET back out when you're using it for lighting. It's got an HDMI out on here to send out to any sort of video processor, screen, etc. It's got the USB-C host port to connect to a computer for controlling the settings, importing new content, and connecting with a DAW or a computer situation where you're going to see the MVP hooked up like a peripheral. It also has 2 USB ports, as you can see here, a USB 2.0 and 3.0. Those can be used to hook up MIDI controllers directly to it as well in standalone mode. It also has an audio in and out port right here, which can be used for LTC and some other future uses that are still in development. In addition to the I/O back here, we also have these 4 M2 size mounting screws here. So as I said earlier, that can be used to mount in a rack situation or any sort of device or tray, rack holder, arm, clamp, etc. that uses brackets like that, the M2 size, and these nice little rubber feet so it doesn't move around. That's great. It has a nice indicator light on the front showing that it's on and getting data. The MVP also has this really nice little screen on it here, which tells you different information about what's getting triggered and notes and stuff like that once it's turned on, which we'll see in a second. Before we hook it up, let's talk about the specs of the MVP. Currently, the MVP supports H.264, MP4, and MOV videos up to 4K resolution and 30 frames per second, and 4 universes of DMX over ArtNET. Okay, let's hook it up for the first time. All right, so here are the cables that I need to hook up to the MVP. I'm going to save the one that provides the power from the computer till last. So let's plug in the HDMI from this screen, the USB from this APC Mini, and the Ethernet cable that connects me to the hub and the network and the switch. And finally, the host port and power connection through the USB-C port to the computer. So you can see the screen starts firing up right there. We can see right on the front that it says HDMI connected, gives us our ArtNET address. Currently, we don't see any information under video and lights, but just to quickly show you how fast we can set that up, in less than 10 seconds it's up and running, and I can start triggering these cues and seeing the video right here. When you first hook up the MVP, you're going to be prompted to register it to your account, so just follow those instructions and that'll make you eligible for the software and firmware upgrades and great new features that are coming, so be sure to do that. Okay, so once your MVP is hooked up with the host port to your computer, All you have to do here is go to your web browser, type in mvp.local, and it'll bring you to this editor page. It's really that simple. Once you're in this editor page here, you'll see 3 sections on the left-hand side for video, lighting, and LTC triggers, but let's focus on the video to start. So in the video tab, you'll notice that there's all these different boxes, each one representing the video number and the MIDI note number here. The first mappable note is C#-2, and that's because C-2, aka note 0 in absolute MIDI note mode, is always set to be the blackout cue. So that's defaultly set up, meaning the first video, video 1, is actually MIDI note 1. And that will match up with Ableton in absolute MIDI mode, but some DAWs don't use absolute mode, so you want to specify your note number relationship with the MVP if you're not using Ableton. So once we're in here and we're on the video page on the left-hand side, we can click the edit mode toggle. I'm going to navigate to my browser to these clips that I have, and I'm going to drag them right into this box here on the right side. You could also navigate to a folder through the browse, which will open up a browser menu. I like to drag and drop personally. And once you see the preview of the video that you just dragged in there, hit this little upload button here. We can also see that after it uploaded, it appeared in the unassigned videos dropdown. We can also see how much free space we have left on the internal memory of the MVP. Defaultly comes with 100 gigs, which is great. Let's start assigning. So I'm going to go for the next open clip. That's MIDI note E-2. I can use this drop-down menu here to see a list of all the clips that are in the MVP, but you might end up with a lot of clips, in which case you can search for a name. I'm going to search for Hypno. I start typing it in, and boom, it finds Hypno right there. And there we go. It's as simple as that. Let's assign the other 3 videos to the next 3 notes. I'll go Gears for F-2. I'll go Neon Lines for F#-2. And I'll go Wave Neon for G-2. All right, and here we go. We see our videos loaded in there. Another few things to know here is you can delete any video from that note mapping using the X on the side here. And there's also this mode up here, and that allows you, once again, toggle the edit mode button. This determines the action the clips do when they get to the end of the clip. You can either say loop, which will start back at the beginning and loop again. You can freeze and hold on the final frame of the video until something's triggered again, or you can blank out and do a black screen when it's done. So I'm going to use loop. Toggle out of edit mode. Once you've made changes or updated new clips in the lighting or the video sections, you need to send the highest MIDI note, aka MIDI note 127, which would be G8 in Ableton, on the respective MIDI channel for either the video or the lighting. Once you've sent that note, which you can simply do by turning on this headphone and clicking the note in the piano roll or having a clip, that will confirm the changes in the respective sections. And these are for each section individually. So you would send G8 on channel 1 to confirm changes in the video section, or G8 on channel 3 to confirm changes in the lighting section. All right, so you've loaded those clips on. There's a couple different ways to play this back. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you have an HDMI output cable set up on the back of the MVP. Go into whatever you're going to use, whether it's a projector, an input server for a video wall. I'm just using this screen right here as a super simple reference right in front of me. So once that's hooked up, I do have this APC Mini hooked up to the back through one of the USB ports, and I can also set it up to get some playback MIDI from Ableton. These MIDI notes correspond to the first notes in octave range. So if I hit these buttons, we'll see that we get clips playing back. All right, so let's set this up to have an Ableton playback session triggering the MVP. So in here, I'm going to make a new MIDI track. I'm going to name it MVP Video Triggers. I'm going to go into my MIDI preferences. I'm going to go down here. We'll see the MVP for the in, but we don't want anything selected because we don't need any input from the MVP. Down here, out to MVP is going to be track output on. We don't send any sync signal or remote signal as of now, so all you need to do is have track output on. Once track output on is selected, you'll see the MVP as an available destination in a MIDI track. As of now, we use channel 1 for the video trigger channel. So as you can see, I have a track here. I have some of the sections of the track denoted, and I'm going to go in here and just click in some blank MIDI clips, and I'm going to play the first clip, which we know is C#-2 for this build section. I'm going to drag another one in here. I'm going to do the next one up from that for the drop. I can literally grab those like this and just bring them over, hold Option, boom. And then for the breakdown, let's go for that third clip. And here we go. You see the video playing back. Let's wait for that next section. Here we go. And there we go. There's the other clip. We can skip ahead a little bit. There's the third clip for the breakdown. These clips are in loop mode right now, so we only need to send the trigger once, and it'll keep looping until we send the next one. If you have a setup like this, I'd recommend just having a blackout clip even over on this side. I'll make it red, and I'll put that note in it. Turn loop off, and then I know I can always go back and grab that. I do that, and then I know in this section I want to black it out for this little dropout and then come back in with that. So I'll do this, skip ahead a little bit, and as we can see, boom. Another thing you could do if your clips aren't in loop mode is just send a new MIDI note on every bar, or however often you want to re-trigger the clip. And that's a way that you don't have to set your clips in loop mode, but obviously can loop them with the music. Keep in mind that the MVP will keep playing back the clip from the last note it received, even in case playback goes down. And it's really just that simple. Once you've hooked it up and your DAW can see the output to the MVP like we did, send it those MIDI notes at the time along with your arrangement and your trigger in your video. If you have a MIDI controller like this, it's also as simple as just hitting these notes, triggering them. Boom. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the lighting section of the MVP. So in the browser, we're going to want to navigate to the lighting panel here on the left. Alrighty, so in here, looks pretty similar to the video section of it, but we will see up here that we see the ArtNET settings, so the Ethernet IP and the subnet mask. So this lesson assumes that you already have a background or the capabilities of setting up an ArtNET network and some way of sending ArtNET from either a lighting console, or in my case, I'm going to be using Resolume. So assuming that you have a background in it somewhat, we can look at the MVP as an ArtNET node that can receive and transmit ArtNET data. The ArtNET network settings can also be adjusted by clicking the gear icon in the top right corner. So the way the MVP works for ArtNET lighting cues is that it records ArtNET cues and data into it as clips that it can play back when triggered with MIDI, similar to the way the video triggering works. So what we need to do is be able to send ArtNET information into it, record those in the MVP editor software, and then we save those and we'll be able to play those back through our ArtNET network to our lighting. Every light rig is different because different lights and different combination of lights have different channels and parameter counts. So the type of data that we're going to record in the MVP is set up for a simple but specific light rig, as would any type of cue that you're recording into the MVP. So the type of data and clips that we're going to record in the MVP are under the assumption that that part has already been done already, so that the data that we're recording in is talking to the lights correctly and set up specifically for the type of lights that are going to receive these cues out of the MVP. In my case, I'm just using two simple RGBA par cans that'll demonstrate recording and playing back cues, but keep in mind that this could be for a much larger light rig and contain a much denser amount of data for different lights and a different system. In my case, it's a very simple setup just to showcase the functionality. What's great about this setup is that you can write complex lighting cues on a bigger system like a Grand MA or similar lighting desk, or using Resolume. And once you've done that complex programming, you can record those full cues back onto the MVP, and that allows you to play back those lighting cues simply from the MVP when triggered with MIDI and not need to bring that huge lighting desk out on a whole tour where that might not be a financial option. So just to clarify, I have the Ethernet port from the back of my computer sending the ArtNET connected directly to the MVP for recording. So here we are looking into the lighting section of the MVP editor, and we'll see there's a bunch of stuff that was in this one already. So I'm just going to go down to these blank notes down here starting at F1. So once again, just like in the video side, I'm going to toggle the edit mode button here. Then we'll see that the record new clip button becomes enabled. We'll click that, We can see the ArtNET preview down here, which shows that the MVP is getting ArtNET activity. I'm going to name this one MVP test. Oh. And what's cool is when you hit start recording in here in the editor, it'll wait until the first change in DMX input to start recording the actual cue, which is really handy. So I'm going to hit start recording. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to run this cue. Here we go. I see the data changing down here. Stop recording. Close. I see MVP test, the one we just made. We're going to assign that to note F1. Okay, so let's record another cue. So I'm in edit mode still. I'm going to record a new clip. I'm going to call this one Flashes. I'm going to start recording. I'm going to play my track so I can flash it in time with the track. Here we go. There we go. I might have been a little sloppy when I hit the end of the record, but that's on me. Now we see flashes. We're going to assign that to F#1. Make sure we're in edit mode. Once I'm done with these changes, I'll send MIDI note 127, aka G8, on channel 3 to confirm. Flashes. We're back in Ableton. Once again, if you're hooking the MVP up for the first time, this is how you're going to want to go in here to the MIDI preferences. And you don't want any input, and just make sure you have track output on. And then we're going to make a new track called MVP Lighting Triggers. We're going to send the MVP, and lighting cues are on channel 3. So the MIDI notes we send to channel 3 will trigger the lights. Okay, so I know that at the drop, I want to use the flashes clip. We check here. We know that the flashes clip is F#1. I go in here to F#1. Okay, so we have F#1 in there. Let's roll from the playback a little ahead of that, and let's watch the cue. Here we go. Pretty cool. Here we go. While those clips play, we'll see that on the MVP reflected there. Note 41, F1. Note 42, F#1. Pretty cool. Okay, so here's how the connections work between the MVP, the ArtNET node that feeds the lights via DMX, and the computer that generates the cues over ArtNET. So the MVP and the node are both hooked up to the computer through an Ethernet switch. So they're both seen by the computer. And when I run cues from the computer, they are seen by both devices, on the MVP for recording and on the node to show me the programming on the lights as it's recording in the MVP. And then when I'm done with that and I'm ready to play back the cues from the MVP, I would simply connect an Ethernet cable directly from there to the dongle, node, whatever you want to call it, out to the lights via DMX when I'm playing back the cues. Make sure that that is set to receive on Unicast, or that the DHCP settings on it are correct for your network. Once again, look into that more if you're having issues, and you'll be good to trigger your lights and your video in tandem from your playback. So another really cool thing is that the MVP shows up as a client or a host for an RTP MIDI session. So if you're familiar with RTP, which is MIDI over Ethernet, that means that you could have the RTP session sending MIDI to the MVP anywhere in a huge network, right? So if you have a massive installation or somewhere with multiple screens and different things, but they're all controlled by one central MIDI generating device, the RTP MIDI session allows you to have the MVP anywhere in that network and be able to receive the MIDI and be seen in a session like this in the RTP MIDI network setup, which is available on both platforms, Mac and PC. And that's all going to be done through your Ethernet port. Another very handy and very professional element of the MVP. So here we are in the LTC Triggers section of the editor. LTC stands for linear time code. If you don't know about it, go check it out. It's an audio protocol that's used to synchronize video playback, lighting playback, automation, things like that. If you are familiar with LTC, if you're able to generate LTC with a source such as a DAW or any sort of audio playback device and get that audio signal into the MVP, you're able to synchronize your video clips and your lighting clips with specific timecode offsets. So say in my Ableton session, I'm using timecode hour 1, second, minute 0, second 0, frame 0. We'll click this. We'll designate hour 1, minute 0, second 0, and frame 0. We'll select the Hypno clip here, and we'll save that. And if I wanted to do one for lighting, you just simply click the same button. I'll do Gradient Fire, and we'll assign it to the same offset here. And there we go. And by setting those up and sending that audio in, you'll be able to trigger those clips. If the timecode audio source drops out, it won't stop playing the clip until the end of the clip, unlike a traditional timecode situation. That's something that may be changed in the future, but for now, that's something to keep in mind if you're using the timecode setup. Well, I hope you learned how the MVP works. It is pretty simple overall, but very powerful and offers a lot of professional functionality that's accessible to someone without a huge knowledge base or without a huge budget or without a bunch of time. So these are all really great reasons to check out the MVP if you're a band, a musician, an artist, a DJ, art installation, visual artist, venue owner, stage designer, festival producer, any of these things. The MVP could really come in handy. It could save you some time, save you some money, and really elevate your art and your production in a way that would have taken a lot more personnel, a lot more time, a lot more money and equipment in the past. So make sure that you check out the MVP from Forecast. Once again, I'm Jules Jenssen coming to you from Shabby Road. I appreciate you taking the time, and please follow Forecast to stay apprised of all the updates and new features and availability of these MVPs as they start rolling out. All right, till next time, thank you so much.